You know, sometimes you hear a story about a comeback, one so completely impossible it literally changes the course of history. Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. This isn't just any story. It's about a legendary rivalry, a perfect battle, a crushing defeat, and a reversal so shocking it forged an entire empire.
Okay, so everything boils down to these two battles fought 14 years apart. They literally decided the fate of the ancient world. You've got Hannibal Barca for Carthage versus the Roman Republic. First up, the Battle of Cannae. Hannibal and Carthage get the win. But fast forward 14 years to Zama, and suddenly Rome, led by a general named Scipio, comes out on top. So the big question is, how on earth did Rome pull off such a massive turnaround? Let's get into it.
Our story kicks off in 216 BC on a hot, dusty plain in southern Italy. By this point, Hannibal had already invaded Italy and had been humiliating Rome for years. So Rome decided enough was enough. They put together the largest army they had ever fielded. This was supposed to be the final, decisive blow to crush him for good.
I mean, just look at these numbers. The Romans showed up with, over 86,000 men? And Hannibal? He had just 50,000. He was outnumbered almost 2 to 1. Any other general would look at that and say, nope, not today. But Hannibal, he wasn't any other general. He saw this not as a problem, but as the perfect setup for a trap.
And the result? It was, well, it's considered one of the most brilliant and absolutely brutal victories in all of military history. In just one day, Hannibal didn't just beat the Roman army, he erased it. He pulled off this genius tactic called a double envelopment. Basically, he made his center look weak, baited the Romans to charge right in, and then snap. He swung his flanks around, attacking them from all sides. He trapped them completely and just systematically took them apart. At least 67,500 Romans were killed or captured. Rome was on its knees. I mean, how do you even begin to come back from something like that?
Well, you definitely don't come back overnight. For years, Rome just tried to avoid Hannibal, using these clever delaying tactics. But in that time, they also found their own genius general, a young guy who had actually seen the disaster at Cannae firsthand, Publius Cornelius Scipio. And he figured out that to beat a guy like Hannibal, you had to become even better. Rome's road to recovery was, well, it was long and it was tough. It took years. Scipio didn't just rush off to fight Hannibal right away. No, he was smarter than that. He took command in Iberia, which is basically modern-day Spain, and he just systematically dismantled Carthage's power base there. It wasn't until 204 BC, after years of rebuilding and winning, that he was finally ready to do the unthinkable. Take the war straight to Carthage's front door in Africa.
And what's really amazing is how Scipio built his army. He took the humiliated survivors of Cannae, the very men who had been disgraced and basically exiled to Sicily, and he retrained them. For a whole year, he just drilled them non-stop, forging them into this incredibly disciplined, professional fighting machine that could go toe-to-toe with Hannibal's best.
So with Scipio now threatening Carthage itself, Hannibal is finally called back from Italy to defend his home. Can you imagine? After 14 years of campaigning undefeated on Roman soil, he was finally going to face a Roman army on his own turf. And this army was led by a general who had spent his entire career studying his every move. The stage was set for the ultimate showdown.
Let's break down the forces here. Hannibal had more infantry, plus he brought 80 war elephants. Think of them as the tanks of the ancient world. But Scipio had a secret weapon. He'd made an alliance with the Numidians, who were famous for being the best horsemen around. This gave him superior cavalry, the very weapon Hannibal had always used to crush the Romans. So each general had a major advantage the other had to figure out how to beat. Hannibal's plan was pretty straightforward. Use the elephants to smash the Roman lines, then let his infantry mop up the rest. But Scipio had a plan of his own. He had spent years, literal years, thinking about how to beat Hannibal. And he was about to turn his enemy's greatest weapon into his biggest weakness. Okay, so here's how Scipio's genius plan played out, step by step. First, the elephants. Scipio ordered his men to blow these huge horns, making a terrifying noise that totally freaked out the animals. He'd also cleverly left open lanes in his formations, so the panicked elephants just stampeded right through without doing much damage. Second, his cavalry completely dominated. They used the chaos to smash Hannibal's horsemen and chase them right off the battlefield. Third, and this is key, was discipline. As the main infantry lines crashed together, Scipio's troops didn't fall for Hannibal's trap. Instead, they reformed into one long, solid line. And finally, the finishing blow. Just when the infantry battle was at its most desperate, Scipio's cavalry came roaring back, slamming into the rear of Hannibal's army. It was a reverse Cannae. Hannibal was the one who was trapped, and his army was destroyed. And the results speak for themselves. Carthage suffered 40,000 casualties. The Romans? They lost only 1,500 men. It was a total, crushing victory. Hannibal himself got away, but his army was gone. Just like that, the Second Punic War was over, and Rome was the new boss of the Mediterranean.
But the story doesn't quite end there. We've all heard the tale of what Rome did next, how they didn't just beat Carthage, but supposedly wiped it off the face of the earth. So let's talk about one of history's most famous and most stubborn myths.
Right. This is the story you always hear. In this ultimate act of revenge, the Romans plowed the fields of their most hated enemy with salt so nothing could ever grow there again. It's such a powerful image of total annihilation. But did it actually happen? When you think about it, the story just doesn't make a whole lot of practical sense. The Romans were, above all, pragmatic. Why on earth would they destroy some of the most fertile farmland in the entire Mediterranean? And think about the cost. Salt was super valuable back then. A soldier's salary was literally paid in it. It would have been absurdly expensive to salt an entire city's territory. Yeah, when you actually look at the evidence, the whole myth just falls apart. First off, this story is a pretty modern invention. It only popped up in the 1800s. You won't find a single ancient writer who mentions salting the earth. And what's more, Rome didn't leave Carthage as a wasteland. They actually rebuilt it. It became a huge, important city in their empire. And that whole region, North Africa, that became Rome's breadbasket, the place they got a huge chunk of their food from. So yeah, it's a cool story, but it's definitely not history.
And that kind of leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? The story of Rome salting the earth is so powerful because it feels like the right ending to such a bitter, epic rivalry. But the truth is way more interesting. Rome didn't destroy Carthage's land, they took it over. They repurposed it. Empires, it turns out, are often built not on total destruction, but on smart, shrewd pragmatism. It really makes you wonder, what other famous stories from history are more about the narrative we want to believe than about what actually happened?